Shalom, this is Beit Bar. My name's Gene, and this is our Wednesday evening online Bible study. Today is the 26th of March, 2025, and we're going to be going into the second half of the 14th chapter of Zechariah in English. Um, and let's go ahead and get moving into our stuff. Okay, going to start with. No, that's not it. That's not it. That's it. Okay, get that out of the way. Okay, this is our bulletin for the week. You'll notice the date is a little bit ahead of right now because the bulletin's set up for Shabbat. So on the 29th, it'll be Shabbat, and the bulletin will then be right on time. Okay, couple of things and some announcements for you guys. If you notice right at the top here, right under the Beit Bamidbar Messianic Outreach, um, we have our website as a .com, and we also have a new phone number. Yay! Um, One of the peculiarities of living up in North Idaho is that if you live around here and you have a phone number that's not from here, people think that you're, you know, a little bit odd, that you haven't quite settled in. And so what I did is we went and got a new phone number and a new phone for the congregation, and that's the 208 number that you see on the screen. And you can contact us through our website, www.baitbamidbar.com. And so you can get onto these meetings through there. I think most of you are doing that now anyways, but we'll get to that in a moment. Again, um, we have our regular services at 9:30 on Shabbat at the Idaho State Veterans Home in Post Falls, Idaho. Um, some of you are not from this area, so if you get started now, you'll be able to make it on time for the Shabbat service. Be great to see you there. It's open to the public, even though we're in the veterans home. It's open to the public. Just tell the guy at the gate, excuse me, at the door, um, that you're with the Beit Bamidbar prayer service, and they'll let you in. Okay. Our readings for this week is Pekudei, the accountings of and more information about the construction of the tabernacle. We finish the book of Shemot or Exodus with this reading, and so we recite Chazak, Chazak, Benit Chazek. Be strong, and may we be strengthened once we finish that reading. All right, continually pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That's we still need to keep praying about that. So don't give up, don't slow down. Um, we need to keep praying for that. There's just so much going on and so much treachery that's happening. So we need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and for us in our country. Okay, next week's reading is the beginning of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, and that'll be next week's reading after Shabbat is over. Okay, our weekly meetings. Wednesday night right here on this channel, 6:30 on Wednesdays, and there's a slight change in the instructions. Instead of going to the GoDaddy link, you can go straight to the BeitBamidbar.com website and scroll down a bit, and then you'll have it'll show you. You can click on that, and it'll take you right into here. So that should simplify things a bit, and so everything's kind of under one roof, and you don't have to go here and there to find things. Okay, upcoming events. Um, this coming Shabbat is Shabbat HaChodesh, the Sabbath of the month, which basically it's the Sabbath before the the beginning of the new year, where God says that the month of Aviv um, is the beginning of the months. We always call it the beginning of the year, but actually he says the beginning of the months, which functionally means the same thing in this case. Um, so we have the Sabbath of the month, and it's followed on um, see, actually that's yeah, that's this week. Um, so it's we have Rosh Chodesh in the evening on Saturday evening, and also Rosh Hashanah, um, the biblical New Year. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year, the head of the year, and this is the actual biblical New Year. This is where God says this is the beginning of the months. What we have in the seventh month, uh, traditionally called Rosh Hashanah, is according to tradition, it's the beginning of the agricultural year. And it's also considered traditional for the year of counting the kings and counting the years of for the Jubilee and so on, the Shabbat, the sabbatical year and the Jubilee. But it's not called Rosh Hashanah in the Bible. Okay, so it's called, these are events on the seventh month of the year. So we're going to be starting very quickly, a couple days from now. It's going to begin um, Rosh Chodesh, the month of Nisan or Aviv. Nisan is a traditional name. Aviv is the name that God gave it, gave the month. Um, okay, and then a couple weeks after that is Shabbat Hagadol, which is the Great Sabbath, and that leads us up to Pesach. Yay, Passover. And we have a whole new set of stuff to do in April to deal with Passover. The only thing I want to remind you of right now is, if you haven't done it yet, start cleaning up your house, because you want to remove all the chametz, all the yeast from your house, um, and get it out of your house and get it away from you. The rules are simple. You're supposed to get it all out of your household. You don't even want to have it where you can see it. You shouldn't be owning any of it right now. And if you do like I do, I mindlessly take a look at the price of um, the canned chicken broth over at Costco. Got me so for so many years. I can finally remember now to not bite. But for a lot of years, I would look at the deal they have, and it's always just before Passover. They're selling off all their stock of stuff that's got yeast in it, and the chicken stock in at Costco in the cans, it has yeast in it. So I always sucker myself into that. Well, I finally gotten over that, and I'm kind of wary of it, but you know how that goes. So if you haven't done it yet, go through your pantry, go through your kitchen, go through wherever you have food or stuff hiding. Start reading the labels if you haven't yet, and look for yeast. Uh, Yeast is an ingredient in this stuff, and it's also a good time just to check to see for expiration dates. So you want to put all that stuff together and consume it all and use it all up before it's going to be, April 12th, or between, actually a day before then, because it's Sabbath, that the evening before this year. So let's be on the ball this time. Don't be like me. Be on the ball. Okay. We'll cover the rest of the dates coming up. Um, and next week when we get a little bit closer for the rest of it. The only other thing to consider, it's a really little bit strange, but Passover is not a Sabbath. It's not a day of rest. Don't do any regular work. Considering all the stuff you're supposed to be doing, in that first Passover and everything that follows, I'm not surprised that it's not listed as a day of no work. However, the next day is the first day of Chag Matzot, um, or I should say the next evening, is the beginning of Chag Matzot, and that's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the first and last day, the first and seventh day of unleavened bread, are days of no work. It's it's like a Sabbath. It doesn't use the I don't think it uses the name Sabbath, but it's it don't do any regular work, so it's kind of the same. Okay, um, and so we'll get the rest of these when we're done. Any when we get to that, actually, as we pull off the dates from before, I'll add some more in. Any questions, comments, or rebukes on our bulletin or the calendar as we have it right now? Okay, let's get this closed. And then we're going to go to, this time for sure, Zechariah 14b. Um, I the for the 14a for the regular 14 was longer than this one. I think we did 10 verses in 14. We're only going to do about five for what's left of 14, chapter 14, and that's the end of the book. We're going to spend a little time probably doing a few odds and ends, and we do have some holidays to talk about. I think we did this last year, but I may just do an update for this year. Um, so we'll spend a couple weeks doing that, and eventually we're going to get to Galatians. I'm keen to get into Galatians uh, after we're done with Zechariah. So, anyways, so here we are. Okay. Um, so let's take a look at verse 11. We'll get into, and this is, we get into some nice prophecy here. If you're a prophecy buff, you're going to like this section. This verse 11, people will live there, talking about Jerusalem. The curse will be broken, and Jerusalem will live in safety. Okay. And it's Veyashvu ba vekerem lo yiye od veyashva veyushalayim lavetach. Okay, and literally, and will dwell they in her, and dedicated to destruction not will be again, and will dwell her city peace to the safety. I know I've been on this curious rant about to me it's curious how the literal Hebrew, because I always get a kick out of people doing interpretations, and they say, well, this is right out of the literal Hebrew, and it says, and they'll do their own version of fixing the syntax and the words to fits what they're wanting it to say, which hopefully they're honest enough to want to say what is written. But you end up with a lot of translation choices. And for me, it's been a curiosity. And when I first went through this in Zechariah, I was in the middle of doing that, um, looking at what does it really literally say, and what I find out in eventually it's very, very difficult to very literally translate Hebrew because the word structure is different. Um, and there's just the sentence structure, and so you to properly translate into functional English, you have to bust up the Hebrew syntax and word structure, and so I've done this in a couple of sets of translation and Bible study. I tried to keep it to as literal as I can make it, just out of the curiosity of how crazy it sounds when you read it in English. Okay. Okay. And now, not just safety, but also prosperity. See, Yechezkel, Ezekiel 36, 8 to 12. It says, but you, mountains of Israel, you will sprout your branches and bear your fruit for my people Israel, who will soon return. I'm here for you, and I will turn toward you. Then you will be tilled and sown, and I will multiply your population, all the house of Israel, all of it. The cities will be inhabited and the ruins rebuilt. I will multiply both the human and animal populations. They will increase and be productive, and I will cause you to be inhabited as you were before. Indeed, I will do you more good than before, and you will know that I am Adonai. Okay. So part of the promise is that, and actually it's curious is it says God he will turn to us, and that phrase is actually used in the priestly benediction. The second phrase of the priestly benediction, um, uh, yeah, Yehovah, uh, I didn't know, I did, yeah, Yehovah, Panen Alecha. Good. I'm blanking on it all of a sudden. Anyways, it means that is the Lord will turn to you and dote over you. Okay. Which is really cute. I like that phrase. He'll turn to you. In other words, he'll pay attention to you and then dote over you like a loving father would a son, um, who pleases him very much. you know you get the picture of the kid runs and jumps on daddy and tickles and wrestles and stuff, and that's how God is going to treat us, or does treat us, is that he he basically picks us up and loves on us and tickles us, and sends us, bless us and sends us on our way happy. Okay, any questions, comments, rebukes? Please feel free to speak up if you have any. I want to take the questions as you have them. Um, you know, I'd rather do it now than try to go back when we've kind of forgotten. It's not fresh in our minds. So please, if we run into something that you have a question, um, go ahead, pop up. I don't care. I don't care if I have to stop doing what I'm doing. Okay. All right. And also a similar point is Yechezkel, Ezekiel 36:24. For I will take from you among the nations, gather you from all the countries, and return you to your own soil. Then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your uncleanness and from all your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit inside you. I will take the stony heart out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit inside you and cause you to live by my laws, respect my rulings, and obey them. And you will live in the land I gave to your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your God. And I will save you from all your uncleanness. I will summon the grain and increase it, and not send famine against you. I will multiply the yield of fruit from the trees and increase production in the fields, so that you never again suffer the reproach of famine among the nations. Okay. This is also part of the promises that God promises if we keep his commandments. The deal, the arrangement between God and Israel is, if Israel walks with God and does what he says, he will bless Israel and give them rain in its proper time, which produces the food in its proper time. And your cattle will grow fat and healthy. Your family will grow big and healthy. The country will be big and strong, and no one will want to mess with you. Um, and that's the promise that God gives. Okay. Now, the other half of that promise is, if you don't walk in his ways, if you don't treat him with the respect that he deserves, he's going to hold back the rain. And then you won't get much grass. You won't get much food. You won't be able to grow much. Your cattle will be few and weak, and your families will be small and weak, and your country will be small and weak. And everybody will want to come and mess with you because you'll be easy pickings. So that's the core of the deal. There's a lot of details after, that go along with this, but that's the core of the deal between God and Israel. If you do his thing, he'll give you the rain, and you will have great abundance. You'll grow big and strong, and you'll conquer your enemies and your enemies will flee from you. If you don't walk in his ways, then he won't give you the rain, and bad things happen following after that. So
I have
that's
a
the core
question.
of the deal. I'm sorry, what?
I have a question.
Sure.
So it mentions in both of these that Adonai will is going to gather up all the Israelites and bring them back to the nation.
Yes.
Could you give me like a brief like refresher on what caused them to be scattered out?
Yeah, that was part of the curse that God pronounced on Israel if they don't follow him. If they don't obey Israel and they chase after the other things that people call gods that aren't, um, God will withhold the rain. Excuse me. God will withhold the rain, and the people will become weak, and other people will come to the eventual point that other nations will come and take Israel away from their homeland and scatter them amongst the world. And we this happened in three different times during the Assyrian kingdom. There's three different times that the northern tribes were captured and taken away to the point where they were dispersed in very, very few and recognizable numbers. And the southern kingdom, Judah, was captured and taken away by Babylon 50 years later, 150 years later. Um, and so Israel, the land of Israel was basically um, emptied out of people who belonged to Israel. And it wasn't until 70 years after that that the Persians took over from the Babylonians, and the Persians allowed Israel to come back to her homeland. Um, and of course, it happened again later on. You know, I don't remember if it's in the about 100 years or 50 years or so before the Common Era. Israel was not walking with God, and so the Greeks came and took over. Um, and Israel repented to the point that God gave victory over the Greeks who are a much larger and stronger country. But again, they got complacent and went after other gods, and the Romans came in and took over after that. Um, and uh, and eventually there was a couple of rebellions by Israel against Rome, and the first one created the destruction of the temple in 70 CE. And then another rebellion happened, ended around 120, with people being dispersed all over the place, all over the Roman Empire. So, and it wasn't until, there have been Jewish people living in the land of Israel all along, but very small and very weak and very scared of everybody else who's bigger and stronger living in the same territory. Um, and it wasn't until um, you know turn of the century into the 1900s, late 1800s into the 1900s, where there's a major interest in moving back to Israel because of all the pogroms that were going on in Europe and around the world. Um, that Jews began returning home to Israel um, in that time, and that eventually set the ball rolling. And after the Holocaust, of course, the United Nations decided that Israel has to have a homeland, and they set aside some territory in the area of what used to be Israel, and that began what we have now as the modern Israel. 1947 is when the Balfour Declaration was came to fruition in the establishment of the United Nations, declaring that certain territory is going to belong to Israel and the rest would belong to the Arabs. The Arabs didn't like that and fought. And it wasn't until 1948 where Israel's declared a nation of its own, declared itself to be a nation of its own, and it continued that war until they managed to survive it. And we've had several versions of that war since then. So yeah,
Wow.
that's right. That's a long rant,
No, that was
um,
perfect. Thank you.
yeah, it was when the people did not walk in God's ways, He would stop the rain, and it's even even in modern Orthodox Judaism, um, there is it's considered that the early rains come in the late fall, and the late rains come in the spring because that's the agricultural year in Israel. And while it's considered that God is judging Israel for their sins if it rains during Sukkot when everybody's dwelling in roofs that will let rain in. Um, After that's over, the prayer service adds a little bit of a line that we pray for rain, asking God for rain because now we need the rain, and Israel is specifically designed that it needs rain for the agribusiness to work properly. You can only get so much water out of the river, and there's not enough rivers to water the whole land. But so this is where that contract still stands, and it's considered God's judgment on Israel. Well, on one hand, if it rains during Sukkot, but after Sukkot, if it doesn't rain, it's God's judgment against Israel for their sinfulness. Okay. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? Okay. Let's go on to verse 12 of Zechariah 14. Adonai will strike all peoples who have made war against Jerusalem with a plague in which their flesh rots away while they are standing on their feet. Their eyes rot away in their sockets and their tongues rot away in their mouths. Okay. Um, Similar also to verses 4 to 10 earlier in this chapter. The nations gathering to fight against Israel will be defeated. And in this case, very specifically, in a very, wow, tough way. And you know, um, so it's the nations are gathering together to fight Israel, who those nations will be defeated. Okay. Like in Yeshayahu, Isaiah 37:36. Then the angel of Adonai went out and struck down 185,000 men in the camp of Ashur. Early in the next morning, there they were, all of them corpses, dead. Just in case you weren't sure what they meant by the corpses, they're all dead. Okay. And and it's cursed with a plague, or in this case, literally the plague, um, Hamagefa, um, which means slaughter or a plague, and will strike, will smite with a plague. The plague which will, literally, the plague which will plague, or slaughter which will smite, depending on how you want to translate that. Okay. In modern times, we would equate this plague to the effect of a neutron bomb. Not that we've ever unleashed a neutron bomb on anybody or anybody's, but the effect, um, it's been stated that it's going to cause the flesh on people to basically burn away, to rot away, and you're going to end up with, partially desiccated corpses. Um, so, those of us who are in modern times, we say, "Oh, yeah, that could be." Now, of course, the text doesn't plainly say this is a neutron bomb. So, um, but as far as what we know commonly, I don't know all the big dark secrets of our military as to what's if we even have these kind of bombs, and if that's actually the desired or expected effect. Nonetheless, that's sort of the rumor that's out there. Okay. Questions, comments, rebukes? Okay, verse 13. When that day comes, there will be among them great panic sent by Adonai, so that everyone lays hands on his neighbor, who in turns attacks him. And we've seen this kind of thing in the past, what God does. Okay, and the panic is mehumat, means a commotion or a disturbance of. Okay, um, so it's we read it in the English as panic. That makes sense. A commotion or a disturbance also works. Okay, Kind of similar to Haggai, the book of Haggai 2:22. I will overturn the thrones of kingdoms. I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the nations, and I will overturn the chariots and the people riding in them. The horses and the riders will fall, each by the sword of his brother. And that's an interesting concept. Um, Interesting concept in that God will cause the enemies of Israel to attack themselves. And you kind of wonder, well, how that's going to happen. And if you think about it, God may have already preloaded part of the methodology into the enemies of Israel, because um, within Islam, you have two major factions, Sunni and Shia. Okay, and they don't get along a lot. In fact, a lot of the wars they've had have been against each other, trying to exterminate each other. So you can imagine it won't take much for God when all of Islam and all the other nations that are going to turn against Israel are all packed around Israel, pointing towards Jerusalem. It wouldn't take a whole lot for God to get these factions to turn on each other rather than to go against Israel. Um, and so it's entirely possible. God's done that before. Um, and it could happen. You know, I don't know sure enough by the language of our prophecy here to say that's an absolute fact, but it's happened before. So don't be surprised. Okay. Also, Shoftim Judges 7:22. Gidon's men blew their 300 shofars, and Adonai caused everyone in the camp to attack his comrades, and the enemy fled beyond Beit Shittah near Tzrerah as far as the border of Avel Mecholah by Tabat. Okay. Um, so we have another instance of people, um, God just put it on everybody else's mind to kill each other. Okay. Um, to the point where they were finally, nowhere near enough of a size or strength to continue acting against Israel, to continue attacking. So this is all good stuff for us, but very bad for them. And this is part of how we're going to know that God truly has his hand on this circumstance, because um, when Israel's going to actually engage in the fight, it's going to be more of a mop-up operation than it is contending against an orderly and determined enemy. So that's going to be one of the ways we're going to know for sure that this is God's hand. And if you're a student of the escapades of Israeli army in the wars that Israel's had, you can see God's hand in a lot of this with exactly the same thing. Um, the Israeli army gets very special help from God or very special defense, and the enemies of Israel end up running away and facing a great embarrassment as a result. Okay, questions, comments, rebukes? Okay. Uh, we have an interesting translation issue here in this one. Yehuda too will fight against Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the nations will be assembled, gold, silver, and clothing in great abundance. So if you're casually reading along and it says that Yehuda, the tribe of Judah, will fight against Jerusalem, which is in the territory of Judah, doesn't make sense. So you got to look at the word. Okay. I put a question mark there. Against? You sure you want to mean that? Okay. Tilachem Yerushalayim, they will fight in the city of peace. Okay. The B right there means in. Okay. Not against, but in. So if anybody wants to point out that, if their translation says against, you want to point out that the Hebrew actually says he will fight, Judah will fight in Jerusalem, not against Jerusalem. Okay? Okay, verse 15. A plague like this plague will also affect the horses, mules, camels, donkeys, all the other animals in those camps. So warfare is a little different in modern times. They really don't have much in the way of horses, mules, camels, and donkeys, but you have trucks and tanks and mobile missile launchers and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how this all works out. If the plague, is a neutron bomb or an electronic um, blast that disables all the mechanized military, and the armies attacking Israel have to resort to horses, mules, camels, and donkeys, or I don't know. We'll have to see that when it happens. It will be glorious, and we will have a good cheer for that when it happens. Okay. 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 Next, the nations will worship the king. Verse 16. Finally, everyone remaining from all the nations that came to attack Jerusalem will go up every year to worship the king, Adonai Tsevaot, that's the Lord of armies, and to keep the festival of Sukkot. Woo-ha! Why Sukkot? I mean, yeah, it's a fun time when we get to, you know, party on for 7 days, 8 days if you want to extend it out. Um, so why Sukkot? Well, here's part of the answer. All major festivals have messianic or prophetic ties. Pesach, the redemption of mankind. First fruits represents the resurrection of the dead. Shavuot represents receiving the Torah or the Spirit. The Feast of Trumpets is the return of the Messiah, the end of the age. Yom Kippur is the final judgment. And then Sukkot is celebration of the messianic reign. Okay. And Sukkot is supposed to happen. Ideally, the calendar cooperates with the season that you have all your harvesting done by the time you get to Sukkot. And so all you have left to do is rejoice in what God has given you out of all the produce of your fields and your vineyards and your flocks and stuff like that. So the Sukkot then looks forward to the messianic reign when Messiah comes and the world is at peace. You know, um, it may not be a total peaceful peace, but it's going to be an enforced peace. And I get that because one of the prophecies is that Messiah will break apart the nations as you would break apart a pot with a rod of iron. That's not friendly. That's not polite. Okay, that's kind of a violent way of breaking things apart. So it's possible that Messiah will wreck all the political allegiances that are in the world, and we will only have our King Messiah as the only one that will rule and reign. And there's going to be some resistance to that during the messianic reign. Um, I'm not saying it's a guarantee it's going to be that way, but that's my 2 shekels on a guess of how it would turn out. Okay. So, the messianic reign, it is time for rejoicing over God's provision. In this case, the ingathering and restoration of Israel. Oops, that doesn't belong there. I took out a number of, I went through this. I had a whole lot of other references, but it's just piling on a whole lot of stuff saying the same thing over and over and again. So I shortened this, and I guess I missed this part. I was erasing part of it and didn't get all that. Well, sorry about that. Okay, verse 17. Questions, comments, rebukes before we go on any further? Okay, verse 17. If any of the families of the earth does not go up to Jerusalem to worship the king, Adonai Tsevaot, no rain will fall on them. Okay. That's a pretty plain statement. Okay. If there's it, the people are supposed to bring gifts to Messiah, to the king, during this time. It's basically how you it, basically you'd be bringing the tithes, the final tithes of the final produce that's becoming ripe. Um, will come, and they'll be used to go to Jerusalem and to worship the king. There'll probably be other things that will be brought, but that's basically in the timeline of the year. Um, Sukkot comes after. I'm sorry, yeah. Sukkot comes at the end of the harvest year, so the very last of what would be tithes would be going to the king during that time. Okay, verse 18. The family of Egypt If the family of Egypt doesn't go up, if they refuse to come up, they will have no, someone put an annual overflow from the Nile, just to explain it in case you didn't catch that. They'll have no overflow. Moreover, there will be a plague with which Adonai will strike the nations that don't go up to keep the festival of Sukkot. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have to go. Oh, how terrible. Usually when I'm teaching about the feasts and festivals of God, it's one of the things that I say just for fun is that you have to celebrate, Sukkot especially. We are commanded to celebrate. You have to celebrate. And you'll be surprised when you're talking to a group of people who don't know how to celebrate God. You see a lot of folded arms and frowns about, I can't do that. Oh, yes, you can. You just got to get used to it. Um, So God commands us to rejoice, several times throughout the year, but especially during Sukkot. We have a week-long party um, that's given to us to celebrate all the good things that God's done. Okay, verse 19. This will be Egypt's punishment and the punishment of all the nations that don't go up to keep the festival of Sukkot. Okay. Uh, no rain. Actually, rain is not in the text. The intent of the phrase in Egypt um, will suffer for their sin like the other nations by a lack of water. In Egypt's case, the lack will not be from lack of rain, but no overflow of the Nile. Kind of already said that. Okay, and then the word punishment there is chatat, which is interesting to me because chet is the root word which means sin. So this would be sin of, if you wanted to make a phrase out of it, chatat. Um, So the their punishment, their sin. Okay. The sin is not going to recognize God. Okay. Uh, Questions, comments, rebukes. Okay, this is a real interesting prophecy. The visual here is very interesting. When that day comes, this will be written on the bells worn by the horses, consecrated to Adonai. And the cooking pots in the house of Adonai will be as holy as the sprinkling bowls before the altar. Okay. So within the commandments, well, actually, let's I think I have the see Hayom Hahu, in the day that comes, or actually means the day this. Okay, the day this. Sure. Yeh al metzilot hasus kodesh Yehovah vehaya hasirot ve'et Yehovah kamitz rakim lifnei hamitz be'ach. All right. In that day, upon the bells of the horse, holy to the Lord, and were the pots in the house of the Lord like bowls in face of the facing or in facing in face of the altar. Okay. That's the literal. Okay, that's confusing enough. Okay. Um, this is an indication of such great holiness in Israel that even the bells of an unclean animal will ring out holy to the Lord. Okay, that's one of the indications. Um, you have to apply a little bit of imagination because if everybody who is Jewish, everybody of the tribes, all come back home to Israel, you're not going to have room for Israel to live in the territory that is now the current state of Israel. Just won't be enough room. And there are multiple promises that God will give Israel um, from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates, and then all the from the Mediterranean all the way to the Jordan. Okay, now if you think about that, that's a territory that I don't know 5, 10 times what Israel is right now. And so, why is this all going to be necessary? Because if the nations of the world are bringing gifts and sacrifices um, all year round, but especially on Sukkot, there's going to be such an abundance of sacrifices and gifts being done. It's going to take a huge crew of priests and Levites to do all the work. And the way it's set up, the priests and the Levites are going to be living closest or close amongst the closest to the temple, the new temple there. And so, out of such a large size of group of people and all the abundance of the gifts that the priests and the Levites receive, um, you're going to have a very large amount of abundance. So you're going to have a very large population and a very great abundance going on during this time, especially during Sukkot, but all year round, because people will be bringing gifts and sacrifices all year round. And there's still going to be an expectation that my expectation that anybody who is of Israel that's not living in the land is still going to travel to the land 3 times a year. And so it's going to be, a huge airport, maybe big docks for big, cruise ships to come and bring people there and back. It's going to be something kind of like that. It's going to be very, very large. And it's going to be so holy that even the horses, which are an unclean animal, you don't eat horses, are going to be adorned with holiness to the Lord, Kadosh Ladonai, okay, or Kadosh LaYehovah. Um, and so that's huge. It's just huge, okay. Um, and that's kind of my take on this, okay. And so the gifts and sacrifices will be of such great volume, so many people coming to the house of the Lord that the priest's portion will be everywhere and become almost commonplace. Okay. Now, just as a matter of background, in case you need to be reminded, out of Vayikra, Leviticus 8, verses 30 and 31, this is where it comes from. Then Moses took some of the anointing oil and some of the blood which is on the altar and sprinkled on Aharon and his garments and his sons, and on the garments of his sons with him. And he consecrated Aharon, his garment, his sons, and the garments of his sons with him. And Moses said to Aharon and his sons, boil the flesh at the door of the tabernacle of meeting and eat it there with the bread that is in the basket of consecration offering. Okay. As I commanded, saying, Aharon and his sons will eat it. What remains of the flesh and of the bread you shall burn with fire. So there's going to be a large number of priests, and there's going to be a large number of sacrifices, um, to the point where I'm sure it's going to, in biblical terms, it's going to be beyond counting. Okay, and also Exodus 19:5. Now, if you will pay careful attention to what I say and keep my covenants, then you will be my own treasure from among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you will be a kingdom of Kohanim for me, a nation set apart. These are the words you are to speak to the people of Israel. This is kind of interesting because if you when the priests were on duty, they were tending to the sacrifices and taking care of things like that. But when they weren't on duty in the temple, their role was to sit in the seat, sit at the entrance of the towns wherever they lived, and they would sit in the seat as judges. They would hear the civil cases, if you will, or the minor criminal cases, and they would judge and they would teach Torah. Okay, so what we have here um, is then you will be my own treasure among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you will be a kingdom of Kohanim for me, a nation set apart. So their job is to teach the world. Okay, when we get to this point where you have so many priests and so many Levites, um, their their other job is to teach Torah to the whole world. And so you're going to see some travel going back and forth um, between the descendants of Levi um, to come and go to wherever they're living, um, but have a maybe have a primary residence around Jerusalem and a secondary residence in whatever town or city where they are serving as judges. So that's really cool. So our, the other thing in this is recognize that God's calling is to teach the world, to teach all the peoples. Okay. So our job as believers is also to teach people God's commandments, God's Torah, and to be that testimony, the witness of how to do things the right way. That's our job. Okay. If you ever heard somebody say, well, if God would tell me what to do, well, right there. Start right there. Okay. So those are the words that speak to the people of Israel. And it also includes all the people that are attached to Israel that are not native to Israel. Okay. Verse 21. Questions, comments, rebukes before I go on. Okay, commentary on 21. Yes, every cooking pot in Jerusalem and Yehuda will be consecrated to Adonai Tzevaot. Everyone who offers sacrifices will come, take them, and use them to stew the meat. When that day comes, there will no longer be merchants in the house of Adonai. Very curious statement. Okay, which requires a translation. Okay. Vehaya kol sir b'Yerushalayim uvi Yehuda. Sorry, Yehuda. Kodesh leYehovah Tzevaot. Uva'u kol hazovchim velachu mehem uvish luhahem velo yeh chanani od be'et Yehovah Tzevaot bayom hahu. Okay, that's a long citation, right? And every pot in city peace, that's my way I translate Jerusalem, and in Judah, holy to the Lord of armies, and in them all the sacrifices, and take they from them and boil them in them, and say, not will be Canaanite in house of the Lord of armies in that day. So the Canaanite, it's a curious translation. And I think I think I get down to a little bit. I'll come back to that in a bit. Okay. So much volume of sacrifice that only the priests lived in Jerusalem and Judah. That's my guess on how how explains it. Overrun with priests and Levites that there's no room for anybody else to live close to the temple. Only the priests ate the sacrifices out of Yechezkel, Ezekiel 46, 19 to 24. Next, he brought me through the entry at the side of the gate into the holy rooms facing north, that they were for the Kohanim. As they're at their far west, I saw a place about which he said to me, "This is the place where the Kohanim will boil the guilt offerings and sin offerings and bake the grain offerings. In this way, they won't have to bring them into the outer courtyard and risk transmitting holiness to the people." He took me into the outer courtyard and had me pass by the four corners of the courtyard. And there in each corner of the courtyard was another courtyard. In the four corners of the courtyard were enclosed courtyards 70 feet long and 52 and a half feet. Um, the four courtyards in the corners were the same size. There was a wall around each of the four, with open stoves all around the bases of the walls. He said to me, "These are the stoves where those serving the house will boil the people's sacrifices." So the picture there is, this is absolutely huge, and to the point where they actually have to build special purpose kitchens to boil all the meat of the sacrifices that the people are bringing for the priests to eat. Okay. However, um, Gentiles who embrace Yeshua will be included with Israel. Okay. And that's out of Yeshayahu, Isaiah 56, verses 6 to 8. And the foreigners who join themselves to Adonai will serve him, to love the name of Adonai and to be his workers, all who keep Shabbat and do not profane it, and hold fast to my covenant. I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Okay. Adonai Elohim says, "He who gathers Israel's exiles, there are yet others I will gather besides those gathered already." I think I missed something here. Oh, yeah, the comment on no longer a Canaanite. Translation issue. Literally means it's Canaani, which means a Canaanite. However, uh, some people choose to translate more like a heathen, um, unclean goddess person, or used as a reference to early uh, Phoenician identity as a trader. So someone who was moving goods back and forth, buying and selling. Um, so some people interpret this as being um, someone who is not of Canaanite descent will be allowed, or it's used in a descriptive sense that those who are engaged in bad business won't be allowed to operate around Jerusalem. Um, I don't have a terribly strong opinion on either approach, so I'm going to leave it like that. um, let's see, and then also Yochanan, John 2, verses 13 to 17. It was almost time for the festival of Pesach in Yehuda, so Yeshua went up to Jerusalem. Um, in the temple grounds, he found those who were selling cattle, sheep, and pigeons, and others were sitting at tables exchanging money. He made a whip from cords and drove them all out of the temple grounds, and the sheep and cattle as well. He knocked over the money changers' tables, scattered their coins, and he said to the pigeon sellers, and to the pigeon sellers, he said, "Get these things out of here. How dare you turn my father's house into a market?" Um, I guess now's the time to tell you that I have some merchandise to sell on my website. No, just kidding. Yeah, don't
It's a
turn
good
this into a
plug.
marketplace. Okay. His Talmudim later recalled that the Tanakh says, "Zeal for your house will devour me." Okay. Uh, Quoting Psalm 69:9, because the zeal of your house is eating me up, and upon me are falling the insults of those insulting you. Okay. Um, so the idea here is, how do you deal with this Canaanite thing? Um, in a way, we kind of have a historical suggestion in John that the even the Jewish merchandisers were taking taking occasion of their location to rip off people. All the stuff that needed to be done that they're talking about could have been done outside the temple grounds, but for some reason, there were people on the inside that had the franchises um, to do, to collect to make money there. Um, it could have been handled properly, and part of the part of it, of course, is um, it was established that one could not bring any money into the temple unless it was the temple shekel. Now, to do that, you would have to bring your the money that you brought, and you would have to exchange it for temple shekels, um, and then you can bring that into the temple and make your offering with that. Of course, that's at an exorbitant markup. If you brought an animal, sure shooting, they would find some sort of flaw in the animal. And since you come all the way to Jerusalem, they say, oh, but for your benefit, we have these special animals that are already certified clean and pure without any blemish. You can buy those at a markup and use those for your sacrifice. And this is what Yeshua was mad about is people were turning what should have been a holy, joyful thing to bring your tithes, your offerings, your first fruits to the Lord, um, but it became a merchandising nightmare. And so, I think the prophecy about not having a Canaanite could include that circumstance, where even though there were Jewish people in the temple running this business, the fact is that was not the place that would be proper to be doing it. And so you can say, people making merchandise, um, you know, even in churches and in synagogues, um, it's I'm taken aback about how casually people mention that they want to do business with you, and they're up at the pulpit during the service telling you they want to do business with you after the services are over. Um, and it's a little counter to what God had said. Okay, so that's all we have for this and for Sefer Zechariah. Questions, comments, rebukes?
Yeah, real quick, Gene, could you
Yeah.
scroll back up to where it mentioned the like selling at the markets? Not through John, but it was the somewhere in the Tanakh, I believe. What was it?
Yeah, that it's usually it.
'Cause I've never seen that.
Yeah, I think it's the comment of there won't be a Canaanite
Right,
in
right.
there. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
in
the
Ezekiel?
actual. Yeah, let me. Yeah, for some reason, the comment on the Canaanite is a little bit out of where it's supposed to be. Let me work my way back up here.
Mhm.
Yeah, here's our thing.
Ah, okay,
Yeah, here's our Canaanite
okay.
right there.
What was the
And
verse? What was the verse again?
uh, what was the Lord's citation? Let's see.
Oh, okay.
1421.
Gotcha, gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. because in this translation it says merchants. It's a complete Jewish Bible translation. But you get down to the actual text, it says Canaanite. So that's sort of a little oops. Yeah, but it's the yeah the placement here is a little bit wacky. Um, so it's there. It's just that some people are polite and don't use the word Canaanite. Okay. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? Okay. Let me close this up. There we are. All right. Father, thank you for bringing us together today, and we are grateful that you gave us your word, that we can learn from it and gain from it, and love you all the more, understand you better, and walk more closely to you, with you, uh, through all this. Father, look out after us as we go our own ways. Get us safe home. Actually, I think we're all at home at the moment. But if, you know, so we'll thank you, Lord, and will gather again, God willing. You're willing next week, and we'll continue on with our study. Hashem Yeshua. Shalom, kids. God bless you.
Bless you too, Rabbi.
Um,
Shalom.
we're
God bless.
gonna do a few little odds and ends um, uh, for a couple weeks before we get into our next book, which will be Galatians. So if you have, and unless there's something else that you really, really, really want to cover, maybe I can sidestep Galatians and do that next after this, after something else. But that's my guess is where I'm going next. Okay. Anything else? Last chance for comments or rebukes. Okay, shalom, kids. We'll see you next week, God willing.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Well,
Give our love to Ellen and Elisheva.
yeah. Shavua Tov is have a good week. Usually we're saying goodbye at the end of Sabbath when it's
Yeah,
dark.
well, how do you say have half of a good week?
No, that's okay. You know what? I responded without even thinking about it. So it slowly dawned on me. Oh, wait. That's
That'll be Hatzi Shavua Tov.
yeah. Yeah, half Shavua Tov. Yeah.
And hello, James.
Okay. Yeah. Hold on a second. Let me get this thing on.